You're live.
We are live and we are back. And this is the Senate Finance Committee, and we are going to take our first walkthrough of S88. And this is our pretty much annual banking, insurance, and securities housekeeping bill. This is one we will need to get out. So make notes and any questions, and we'll get the appropriate people in to talk to us next week or the week after, our next week in session. So Jill, the floor is yours. Maria is going to be joining us. They're voting a bill out in House Energy and Technology, but this is really DFR's bill, and Jill usually walks us through it. And then we let Maria know if we want to make any changes. So Jill?
Thank you, Senator Cummings. It's nice to see you all. This is the first time I've been in your committee this session. So I have a PowerPoint presentation. It doesn't have artwork on it, unfortunately, but I will share it if I can figure out how to do that again.
There we go, it's up.
Oh, if I could just figure out how to start the slideshow from the beginning. There we go. Okay. So this is, like you said, S88, an act relating to insurance, banking, and securities. It has 12 proposals this year, and they truly are all housekeeping. So I'll try to go quickly through this, but stop me at any time if you have questions. The first proposal, and if you have the bill, I'll go by section number, and I can also reference page and line numbers if that's helpful if you're following along. The first is section 1, and this is on page 1, starts on line 10. And this is a proposal to clarify certain terms and titles that unlicensed entities are prohibited from using. The statute currently prohibits unlicensed entities from using the titles debt adjuster, budget planner, licensed debt adjuster, or licensed budget planner. But we would suggest including words of similar import. So we have had some issues with people using terms like debt coach or financial coach or budget coach, and they're similar enough to budget planner and debt adjuster, but since we only reference the specific titles, we're unable to stop them from doing that, or we have less ability to stop them from doing that. So the proposal is just to add, or in each case, words of similar import. And this is in advertising.
Committee, just holler if you have a question, because I can't see you. Okay, keep going.
Okay.
Not hearing anything.
Sections 2 and 3, and this starts on page 1 on line 19. So you will recall our very substantial banking bill back in 2019, at least most of you will, where one of our proposals was to create a combination non-bank financial license. So this is for mortgage brokers, lenders, loan solicitation, and loan servicer. So any combination of those licenses would get a sort of a discount on the fee they would have to pay for licensure. And this is mainly because a lot of entities would get a mortgage broker and a mortgage loan origination license at the same time. So we wanted to license those together. And in some cases, they also got some of the other licenses. The issue is that we were told by our online licensing system, NMLS, that we could do this in a way that would work. It turns out, unfortunately, that we have been unable to make this work well on NMLS. So we had to create a brand new type of license that's a combination license when we really wanted to give them each of the individual licenses that they had applied for and then apply them in a combination manner that gave a discounted fee. We weren't able to do that. And since we had to create a brand new license type that's sort of an artificial creation, we are not receiving the reporting that we need to receive from the individual license types because they're not licensed that way in the system. So we don't get those automatic reporting or through NMLS. The other issue is that public records requests have also been difficult because we can't categorize them easily in our online system per license because they're this artificial combo license type. So we are respectfully requesting that we undo the change that we requested to make in 2019. We have, in terms of stats, if you're interested, we have had 23 firms take advantage of the combination license to date for 99 separate licenses. So they have branches, but it's 23 firms. And in many of the cases, they would get their normal 2 license types, but just add on 1 or 2 extras because they're free. And we suspect that'll be less the case if they're required to pay for them as normal.
Okay, Jill, last year, or 2 years ago, I guess, what you would hope to do would be the mortgage licensor and the mortgage broker would get separate license, but then you would be able to deal with them as one entity.
It was more about the fee, sort of discounting a fee for multiple license types because most of them got both.
So you wanted to discount the fees and your technical system, MNLS, wasn't able to do that. So they're instead all being kind of combined into one license. And because they're not separate, you're not getting the reporting back from each separate license area. And if you get a public records request, it's difficult to separate out what that is because you don't have the separate entities. Is that what's, if I got that
exactly right?
I'm probably going to be the reporter on this one, so.
That's exactly right. And we do need the reporting and sort of this segmentation of who has what license in order so that we know what kind of business they're doing in Vermont and which entities are doing which types of business.
So what happens to the 23 firms?
Well, they'll have to go back, and when they renew their license, they'll have to renew as the individual license types.
Okay. So they're okay for now. Okay.
And this is on an annual basis, so it would only be for a period of months until they needed to renew.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? I'm not hearing any.
Great.
Wait, I do have a question.
Okay.
I'm looking at the draft, Jill, and it says their annual fee shall be, and then it's not in the draft. So does it change the fee amount?
Well, it does. They go back to each of these licenses has its own section with an individual fee. So basically we're cutting out the combination that was a $1,500 fee for up to 4 licenses.
Okay, so what would be the individual fee would go?
They're all different.
Oh, they're all different. Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine. I can look at in statute. I just didn't see it in the actual bill.
They're between, I think, most of them are $500, some are $750, some are $1,000.
Okay.
And I need to get back to my last slide. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, section 4, which begins on page 3 on line 9. This request is to increase the penalty for failure to timely file an annual report. And this is for non-bank licensees. We have many of them for whom $100 per month for failure to file is not a great incentive. And so they're just not bothering to file in Vermont. A lot of these non-bank licensees tend to apply for licenses in all 50 states, but they don't necessarily do business in Vermont, or some of them might, but we don't know if they don't file an annual report. And so we're hoping that by increasing the penalty to $1,000 per month or any part of a month, it will be enough of an impetus to get them to actually file their reports so we know what types of business they're doing in the state. And this would also add in a 5 business day grace period. So we have extra time to sort of nudge them and say, if you don't file in this time period, you're going to get fined, you're going to be assessed $1,000 per month fee. 17% of non-bank licensees failed to file their annual report for 2019. So it is quite a problem. We do send several notices even before they're due, and of course, after they're due. And like I said, the reports are necessary for DFR to know what business each of these firms is doing in the state.
Okay. Any questions?
Okay. Section 5 is on page 3 of the bill on line, starts on line 15. So this is just to eliminate a mandatory annual report requirement for independent trust companies, which seems interesting based on what I just said. But this is because for independent trust companies, and there are only 3 in the state, we actually require monthly or quarterly reporting for them. So we don't need an annual report requirement. We actually require it more often. So this would just change the requirement so that the commissioner can require reports from any independent trust company, including on its financial condition at such times and in such format as the commissioner may prescribe.
Okay.
It just simplifies the statute.
So if you get monthly reports, if the commissioner feels he needs more information than that, he can request it, but they don't have to file an annual report along with 12 monthly reports.
That's right.
Okay. It's a streamlining bill. Okay.
It is. It's very exciting this year. Okay, sections 6 through 8 start on page 4 of the bill on line 6. And this is language that would permit mortgage loan originators and other employees of other license types to work from home. And this came out of course, the COVID crisis. There is a specific requirement in our statute and in our rules that requires mortgage loan originators specifically to, it sort of prohibits them from telecommuting unless they live within 50 miles of the location at which they're employed. And if they do so, they may telecommute. But if not, most of the time their companies have been licensing their homes as branches, so they're able to work from home. And so this would eliminate this 50-mile rule and allow mortgage loan originators, as long as they are assigned to a specific location, to work from home. We would also need to rescind a bulletin and to amend a rule to do this, in addition to the statutory changes requested. But in addition, I want to mention that we would also, by rule, adopt various safeguards and guidance for doing this, including ones that are found in our COVID regulation that allows mortgage loan originators to do this, and in the American Financial Services Association's proposed rule on this front. So, for example, advertisements and solicitations must use a license location, not a home address. In-person customer interactions could only happen at a licensed location, not at someone's home. It would require the use of, for example, virtual private networks and other computer systems that are require various forms of authentication and passwords, cybersecurity protocols, and additional safeguards as appropriate.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question. Jill, do you know, does this have tax implications? We've had a bunch of testimony about taxation of depending on where people are working and where a company is located. I don't know if this is relevant. It just occurred to me when I was looking at the language.
I am not aware of any. I know Molly's on if she has any insight into that. Otherwise, I can follow up.
I believe that because these individuals will be assigned to a certain office, that it's the location of the office that might have some implications. But I think we can go back and verify that. That is kind of the way it works now, because the 50 miles could be, 50 miles into Massachusetts, but their office is in Brattleboro, Vermont. Kind of, it's the same thing. And part of the reason we wanted them to be assigned to an office, even if they're working from home. I think there's a lot of question around that, so we can, not from us wanting to have an office, but in general, there's been a lot of
Yeah.
talk about that. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm all
Okay.
for giving them the flexibility. Just want to know if there's some implications that may be unintended that we should know
Yeah.
about.
I think it's the assignment.
Okay, the present rule says you can't work from home if you live less than 50 miles from the office,
More than 50 miles.
more than 50 miles. Okay. And what some folks were doing, businesses, was just giving the home address of the employee as a branch office.
That's right.
Okay, and this would just say you can work from home under certain circumstances. And you listed some, like no meetings at home, you have to have an office, you're assigned to cybersecurity, all the rest of it, but it was basically keeping people honest and to allow for working from home now. Or just
That's
legitimizing
right.
what's going on now. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of. I mean, I think the way a lot of people are working is changing, and telecommuting is becoming more the norm. So this sort of very specific requirement was in place in our statute for mortgage loan originators only. So we want to make sure that they're able to, as well as the other licensees that we currently allow to work from home.
Okay, and we do allow other mortgage licensees to work from home?
We do, but this would apply to employees of all licensees. So the changes that we're making are across the board.
Okay.
But the 50-mile rule applied to mortgage loan originators only.
Okay.
As a little background, Senator Cummings,
Yes.
the 50-mile rule, I understand, was put into place some time ago, before most companies had the ability to guarantee cybersecurity and secure networks, so that some of the things that happened back in 2008, there was concern about supervision. And we believe now that the technology has caught up with the workforce, and the things that have been listed as the safeguards that we will put into our guidance will make sure that this whole supervision area is covered.
Okay. Maybe you move on to realtors someday.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Any other questions at this point? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Section 9, which begins on page 6, line 4. This is to repeal the requirement that people or licensees whose licenses are terminated, revoked, or suspended don't have to return the paper license. We haven't for years required the return of paper licenses, and we don't issue them anymore. There aren't many floating around out there, but we use an electronic licensing system, but we don't need those back.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, I guess we move on to 10.
Oops. Oh,
Got a
goodness. Now,
question?
how do I get back there? There we go. Okay, so section 10 begins on page 6, line 20. And this is a proposal to simplify and clarify the confidentiality protections that are around examinations and investigations of insurance companies. So we have a section 8 VSA, section 23, that keeps confidential all investigation and examination records of persons licensed, authorized, or registered under parts 2 and 4 of this title. So it applies to securities entities and to banking entities, but not specifically to credit unions or to insurance entities. There are, however, the same confidentiality protections or very similar ones throughout Title VIII for insurance companies, but they're much more difficult to sort of find and to compile and to apply to specific situations. So there are a number of specific exemptions from the Public Records Act in 1 VSA 317C, for example, for consumer complaints, for external healthcare appeals, for trade secrets, and for anti-fraud plans. And then in Title VIII in Section 3574D, there is an exemption for insurance companies for documents and information produced or obtained in the course of an examination. And then in Section 3561B2, there's an exemption for records and information of investigations. So this basically would move those or take those and just sort of insert them in 8 VSA Section 23, which we think is the more natural place to look for these protections. And it sort of eliminates the thought that there are more protections or different protections that apply to banking and securities entities than apply to insurance entities. But again, we don't think this makes any substantive change. It's just a clarification and a simplification of our statute.
So you've got securities and banking in one section, and then somewhere else you've got credit unions and insurance companies. You're putting them all together and then putting the confidentiality protections all in there, so they're all together.
Yes, and this is not, it's like I said, it's not broadening. This is for confidentiality of investigation and examination reports and records, and it would apply to all entities that we regulate under Title VIII.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So sections 11 through 16 start on page, oh my goodness, what page am I on? 7, line 5. And this is a kind of a long section of a lot of pretty minor changes, but basically what this does, the NAIC accreditation team pointed out to us that our HMO RBC Act, which is Risk-Based Capital Act, has some minor inconsistencies with the model that's required for us to adopt to be in compliance with the accreditation standard. Basically, in short, and this is a little bit complicated, but we had included an HMO in the definition of a life or health insurer, which is sort of the natural place to put it. But the risk-based capital requirements for HMOs are actually more similar to property and casualty insurers. So these changes are to clarify that the RBC standards that apply to HMOs are those in the definition that are more similar to the property and casualty insurers. And so we take them out of the definition of life and health to do that and make a few other minor changes. Would you like me to go through each of those changes, or is that?
Committee, would you like a walkthrough? Jill, if you can send me some of that, just email it to me so I'll have it.
Yes.
If and when this goes to the floor. Okay.
Okay, section 17 is our next change. And we go all the way to page 17, line 3. And this is a request to push out the sunset on the insurance regulatory sandbox by 2 years. COVID sort of landed right in the middle of that time period, and we have not to date received any applications. So we're hoping if we give it an extra 2 years, the insurers can focus a little more on this and hopefully take advantage of our program.
An email from somebody in legislature in, I think, Iowa, who wanted to know about it last week or so, and I sent them to DFR.
Oh, I'll have to ask around and see
if
where
they ever got it. I can try and find the email too and forward it. Okay.
Okay. Section 18. So this is again on page 17, line 9. And this is a clarification in the securities section in Title 9 that filing fees, securities filing fees are non-refundable in all circumstances. Right now, the statute says if the filing fee results in a denial or withdrawal, the commissioner shall retain the fee, but our practice is to retain the fee in all circumstances. Other than denial, if it would result in a denial or withdrawal, the reason we want to make sure that people are not asking for a refund of their fee if they make an accidental filing. And this happens quite a bit. I think I heard about, I asked earlier, about 3 times a month out of an average of 185 filings. And when we do get a accidental filing through our electronic filing system, we begin to spend a lot of time reviewing that, and it is fairly time consuming. So if, 3 or 4 days or 5 days later, the person says, oops, I didn't actually mean to file in Vermont, we've already done a considerable amount of work, and it doesn't make sense for us to give that fee back to them.
Okay. How big are these fees?
They range depending on the type of filing, but they're between $80 and $300.
Accidentally file. Just- You aren't,
I think
What-
sometimes people, they just assign it to somebody to sort of file in 50 states, and then they decide they don't need Vermont. And so they say, oops, I don't want to do this. But, we could call that a withdrawal, but people use this specific language to try to argue that it was accidental instead of withdrawal.
okay, but it's not, they filled out a form that said Vermont. It's not just that they pushed the wrong button on the computer.
That's right.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so section 19 on page 19, line 3. This is a change to our statute to align with the ACA rule for grace periods for major medical insurance policies. And the reason we need to make this change is because beginning with the 2022 plan year, instead of the exchange doing the billing directly for unsubsidized plans, the carriers are going to be doing the billing. And so they still need to comply with the ACA 1-month grace period requirements before they can terminate an unsubsidized plan, but our statute didn't line up. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're complying with that ACA 1-month grace period requirement, but also to codify the actual billing practices of carriers. And so we worked with all 3, Cigna, MVP, and Blue Cross, to make sure this timing works out. Basically, the carriers have to provide notice to a policyholder at least 21 days before the due date of the premium, and provide a grace period of 1 month for the payment of the premium. And we also require if they're planning to terminate, they have to send a termination to the notice to the policyholder 21 days before the termination date. So this just gives quite a bit of time for someone with an unsubsidized qualified health plan to make payment and not be terminated. There are real repercussions for being terminated from the health insurance, of course, as you all know. And what I've done here is provided a calendar so you can see how this works. So if a bill is sent at the 1st of the month, and I'm using March here as an example, and the premium will be due 21 days after, so it would be due on the 22nd. The grace period for payment of that would start at the end of March. So they'd have all of April is actually the 1-month grace period required under the ACA. They have to send a termination notice 21 days prior to when that grace period ends, which is the end of April, saying if you don't pay by April 30th, your policy will be terminated. So this is for the payment of April premium, which is sent on March 1st. They have until April 30th, where the grace period ends.
Okay. So because now, or last year, the ACA was billing for the premiums, but now the carriers will be billing.
That's right. They'll be doing their own billing
They'll
instead
be
of it
doing their
coming from
own
the
billing.
exchange.
And this makes sure that included in that is this, what is essential, is at least a month's grace period.
That's right. And it's an
Okay.
entire calendar month, not necessarily 30 days. It ends up being
Right.
longer than 30 days.
It's
And
an
this is
entire
for
month. So if you've
unsubsidized
got
plans.
2 weeks in April, you're essentially getting 6 weeks.
That's right.
Okay.
And this is, like I said, for unsubsidized plans. The subsidized plans where you're getting the tax subsidies, those actually have a 3-month grace period, but those continue to be billed directly by the exchange and not by the carriers.
Okay, so these are only unsubsidized plans. All right,
And that is all.
okay. Committee, questions? Dead air.
It's always thrilling.
Jill, if you take that down, I think I can see them.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Okay. Committee, no questions at this point. Think about it. I plan to put this on for a vote unless we have some problems with it. It does sound pretty much like housekeeping. And DFR has been really good about keeping housekeeping to housekeeping. I'm not sure we've always been so good about not decorating it, but this is you traditionally almost always been non-controversial. Probably the sandbox was the one thing that gave us a little heartburn last time.
I see a sparkle in Senator Hardy's eyes. She has a bill up her sleeve.
And this one?
No, I was just laughing about the sandbox thing because I remember that one being controversial and then nobody's applied for it. So I think it's a little funny. And then my only thing is to get some more information on the tax implications on that one, if there is any. There may not be, but just
Absolutely.
Maybe thinking of the expenses and the 50 miles from the State House, more or less. And it's billed, there's a 50-mile where it's considered income. And after that, I guess now we've been told everybody pays it as income.
Yeah, I think Senator Hardy, you're right that if someone lives in Massachusetts, but it's the state tax issue. Is that what you're asking about specifically? Lives in Massachusetts, works in Vermont, but where's the work actually done?
yeah, both for the
Yep.
individual and for the company.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and just clarity. It probably is nothing, but I only ask it because we've gotten a bunch of testimony and this has gotten complicated on where people live and some court case, et cetera. So I just want to make sure that we're not missing something.
Okay.
We can ask for a fiscal note if that would help. Okay, let's get a fiscal note. All right. Committee, Maria is here. So Maria, so far it's smooth sailing. There are no questions. We have one on taxes. And I was gonna, if you now can work from home and you live in New Hampshire, but your office you're assigned to is in Vermont, would this change the taxes, I assume your personal income tax that Vermont receives? I don't think so, but if we could check on that, and if it does, then we'll have to get a fiscal note.
Sure. I'll run that by Abby Shepherd and see.
Yep.
Yep, sure.
Okay, I think that's the one. Senator Brock.
And isn't that the issue that we discussed? I think it was in this committee rather than the Economic Development Committee, of the dispute between New Hampshire and Massachusetts regarding taxation and where the tax home is. And that seems to be a moving target right now.
We can check on that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of, that
Yeah.
discussion that we had in here and just making sure we're not missing something with this
Okay.
change.
All right. Anything else you'd like to hear about? If you come up with anything, as you think about this as you go about your leisure for the rest of the day. Let me know. We don't have a meeting tonight, right? And we'll get answers for the questions. Okay. Thank you. Jill, if you can send me over, no rush. We're not here next week, but just a little more detailed explanation.
I'll send you.
I mean, this is a bill, there isn't usually a rush to report. So I usually do it.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. And if it's not me, I'll ship it over to whomever else volunteers. I think that's it. Thank you. This was short. Senator McDonald has a question.
I very short request of committee members. We've been looking at bills around CUDs and taxation for broadband. And I would ask that the committee consider whether or not those should apply to municipal electric companies when their governance, et cetera, is similar to CUDs, and not seeking for an answer, but
Okay,
to think
that's
about that before-
not relevant to this bill.
No. before it
Okay,
comes-
so can
thought
I
you were-
say
I thought
thank
you
you
were
to
gonna
these
adjourn it.
folks? No, we're not adjourning exactly yet. I just wanted to say
Okay.
thank you to
Yep.
Molly and Jill. And now you would like us to
Just in the-
think about, rather than exempting,
whatever, to think about whether or not, when we take actions about CUDs and taxation for the purpose of broadband expansion, we might wish to include munis when their governance is the same and their ownership is the same and they own poles and wires, whether we might wish to include them in whatever language we come up with for CUDs, or under
Would
what
this-
conditions we might wish to do them. So
okay,
that's for when that subject comes up again, not for discussion now, but just to start the mild thoughts
okay.
running. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that has been one of my questions, is when we start exempting polls, are we are we going to get pushback from other groups that don't get exempted? I believe municipal polls are exempt. That's what we were told. They're a municipality, so they don't tax their own polls. And we do have the recommendation that we do away with taxing the polls altogether. And I think we heard more today about how to update that taxing statute. So we'll be looking at it. Okay. If you have something you want to get out, let me know, Senator Bray.
Well, so I was going to say down the hall. I'm so used to thinking that way. Yeah, so right down the hall from you in room 8, we're working on, this weatherization bill. And the simplest way of talking about funding it is we have a model in Efficiency Vermont. We pretty much like to duplicate that for how we handle thermal. It's going to involve a proceeding with the PUC to figure out the details of how they would set the charge and regulate the people who deliver the service, just like they do now for the energy efficiency utilities. There's the chance to put that into the bill now, name the tax and where the money will go, even though the PUC has a proceeding to work out the details of it. And what I'm looking to this committee for some guidance on is it worth standing up all the architecture and then filling in the details after the PUC has finished its work? Because now we will have a clear outline of what that tax is, where it goes, who allocates it, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So,
My first reaction is, you've been working on this for 8 weeks and you want us to do it in 4 days? That's going to be the hard part. If you're talking about potentially raising taxes, we know that's not going to be easy.
Well, here's,
And
can I jump in with a quick answer there?
yeah,
So the proposal is revenue neutral.
right.
We already have a budget for two years, actually, for the weatherization assistance program. So there's no pressure to go out and raise money. It's more about looking forward. You'd have a better system for doing it, and you'd put it in place so that you'd be ready to go, as opposed to waiting till you already needed it, which would be a little bit too late.
Okay, but you're taking existing taxes,
Yes.
right? And you are changing their name and putting them all in one pot with the thought that this would be eventually like the charge we do for electric efficiency.
Yeah.
But the first question is, where are we taking the money from? Because that money's going somewhere right now.
Right. So it would go to the very same place. We would write that into the bill. It currently, the fuel tax, and what is really not, it's kind of a misnomer, but it often gets called the gross receipts tax on coal, natural gas as well, it goes to the Weatherization Trust Fund. We're talking about still funding the trust fund, but collecting it into this other
No, the
bucket.
fuel tax goes to transportation, doesn't it?
Well, this is the names are a bit of a mess. When you say fuel, we're trying to regularize the names because it's confusing. People say fuel tax and there's no way to easily tell. Are you talking about fuel that got delivered to your house to burn to make your house warm, or fuel you put in the tank of your car to drive around? So this is fuels delivered to homes for heat. And
That money
currently,
presently goes into the Weatherization Trust Fund.
right.
But
And
your plan is, now, didn't we send the PUC out to investigate the ability to use the electric? We're trying to use the stuff we've got now for thermal. And this is this a setup for a carbon tax?
is this a setup for a carbon tax? I don't know that I would. Someone will probably argue that, but
Yes.
I'd say,
Thank you for
Okay.
having my floor remarks.
well, I said somebody will argue. I didn't say Senator Brock will argue that.
Okay, Senator Pearson, we always like to know the answers before the questions are asked in this
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah.
We obviously, I would assume we would have this bill as the money committee, not as a policy committee. So we would get an extra bit of time, but I'm trying to understand your question, because you're not saying how will we raise revenue? Are you saying how would we plan to raise revenue down the road?
Yes. And it's exactly. And
Well, my
Right.
attitude has always been, if you're gonna take the political heat, you should get the money. And so nobody's gonna say, well, this doesn't make me angry because you haven't started charging me yet. So that's my quick.
I think my concern is that even though we're the money committee, we don't have this bill yet. And I've got next week to get out our bills. So we've got 4 days when we get back to get out the bills that are ours. And then we got 4 days after that to get out this one.
Right.
And we're going to have at least one major one from health and welfare. And there may be some smaller ones coming, but it's the time crunch.
Right.
We can continue to work on it. You know, we'll try and get it out in 4 days. If we can't, then we continue to work on it, and we can always do a committee bill.
And I'll explain why would we bother to do this at all. So one, this is to be ready to do more, because the other thing is that we've looked quite a bit into other ways to raise money, like bonds, getting a waiver from CMS. There are states where already, because of the health benefits associated with a well-weatherized home, they are literally writing prescriptions to weatherize homes for people with asthma and stuff like that. There's the sort of freedom and unity bond thing we talked about before. So we're looking at other ways to raise money, but if we succeed, we don't have a system to put that money in. We have the low-level funding for weatherization assistance, and we have no other system that could receive money and then allocate it, unless we're just doing everything ad hoc.
I thought this all went, well, we'll get to it. I thought you said it all went to the Weatherization Trust Fund.
All the current dollars. And
Yeah.
what I'm saying is there's the possibility of create a bucket into which
Okay,
all the
not
money should go.
necessarily raising the existing taxes. That's always possible, but the
Right.
reason we need to do this is if you find another funding source, it would all go into the same
Right.
system.
Okay. You know, I'll give one little instance of how this is happening to us in a way that's a little awkward right now. I'm totally happy the governor brought money to the table, you know, in the form of $35 million for energy work. But each one of the things that he's bringing is, you know, an individual line item on a budget. There's no one saying, well, here we have a full comprehensive program. We'll take 35 and move it based on our, you know, understanding of the most cost-effective ways to invest it. So we do get a little bit into, I'd say I shouldn't edit this one out, but I'll just say it the way it's coming out, which is like sort of the flavor of the year. Like, okay, so now we think this approach is good. And then we do some of that, and then that fades. And then we have another one 2 years later. We're trying to, and that's in sharp contrast to how we've done electrical energy efficiency, where we created a very steady framework. So the money, no matter how high or low, people brought forward a plan, went through like a rate making process, and then it was funded at that level, and it's had steady achievement. And the other side, so far, it's been kind of ad hoc. We throw things in. And so we're just trying to achieve steadiness and comprehensiveness rather than line item contributions to projects that for one reason or another seem particularly attractive to any administration at a particular moment in time. And I'm not slamming anyone. I'm just saying it's not like a regular program. It's a collection of ad hoc attempts.
All right. Senator McDonald and then Senator Pearson.
Madam Chair, you know, Senator Bray had we had in the morning committee, we had a whole host of folks come in and share with us their planning and thoughts about ramping up weatherization. And it was everything from what the colleges could do, the trades could do to get the people qualified and ready to go to work weatherizing. And it's upfront money that the administration appears to have made available for the need to weatherize in perhaps a decade rather than the 5 decades that the current funding system would support. And we're trying to figure out how we're going to encourage students to come and apply for and be certified in weatherization, only to graduate and find out that the program hasn't been funded. You don't train people to be and offer training to be airline pilots if the airlines don't have any airplanes. This is the trap we fall into as legislators is that we have great plans and everybody agrees to the plan. And then when it comes to raising the money to carry the plan out, everybody's taking a lunch break. So I think what the chair is asking us to consider is it worth coming up with a plan that's supposed to achieve a goal, but postponing the tax that would be required to fund that to the legislatures that get elected after we've quit and gone home. So I think that's the question before us.
Okay, Senator Pearson.
I guess I'm still not understanding, Senator Bray. You said we don't have any place. If there was money available, we don't have any place to put it. That seems to be a very separate question from should we look at a tax proposal for the future when we're ready to raise money, and so Senator Bray, are they different questions or are they the same question?
To me, it's sort of like a hand in glove thing. You know, the thermal energy efficiency charge funds goes into a bucket managed. The legislature would design the program, but the PUC would manage how much money is in the bucket and how it gets allocated out. And so it's a lot like the energy efficiency utilities bringing a demand resource, and we're even borrowing the 3-year cycle that the demand resource plan operates on. So they come in with a 3-year plan to do work, budgets get set, and then you get that sort of steadiness out of it. And the rates don't vary dramatically because it goes through rate making. So we'd like to borrow that same kind of concerted, thoughtful 3-year plan funded by a rate setting process so that we're steady about the work.
What rate?
Pardon me?
What rate? Who's setting what rate? And how is the PUC getting involved?
Sure. So currently, to go back to the energy efficiency charge, the energy efficiency utilities, BED, VGS, and Efficiency Vermont all come before the PUC and say, here's our plan of work for the next 3 years to do the measures, cost-effective measures according to the statutory definition.
But they also have to show that they have saved that amount of electricity.
Right. So, I mean, we would have the same kind of guidance, policy guidance that would drive the PUC evaluation. So with the EEC, with the energy efficiency programs, they come in, they bring this plan, the PUC goes through and says, this seems cost effective. This one, not so much, where we're not approving that. Yeah. They negotiate out the plan and then they say, okay, in order to fund that plan, you need X number of dollars. X number of dollars is raised by an energy efficiency charge of Y. And that's what we pay on our bill. So, I was just looking at my GMP bill today and it tells me per kilowatt hour, I'm paying 0.01188 cents per kilowatt hour. And that odd number comes out of the fact that they calculated at the PUC a rate to raise enough money to do the work.
Okay. But these are regulated utilities, right?
Yes.
You're talking about there's no rates in the fuel sector. They're private businesses that I buy from. So I will grant you it's the same as a tax.
Okay.
But you are talking about giving the PUC the ability to raise taxes on other fuels without legislative okay.
Well, I think I would say that we would control where the program's going and how big or small. I mean, we do this now with the energy efficiency program. Like, we don't get involved in the rate setting, but they're under our control still because we've defined the program parameters well enough. And just to be clear on the I mean, it does feel a little odd because these are delivered fuels, not quote unquote regulated utilities. But as currently designed in the bill, it's the exact same fees we already use, like 2 cents per gallon on delivered fuels. And there's a rate on electricity, and then there's a rate on coal and natural gas, the quote unquote gross receipts rates. So you could literally implement it with exactly the same mechanism, or you could say, oh, this is a little complicated, let's go upstream to a distributor level or something like that.
Okay, and did you do, I know last time the concern with a carbon tax, which would have taxed pretty much the same items, was that it's regressive.
Yes.
And it hits lower income people harder, than higher income people. And this is a necessity.
Yep.
Because those are the issues I'd be interested in talking about.
Well, so we've talked a lot and wrestled with regressivity for years, actually, on this one. And my honest answer is, I think, life is regressive. It's easier to have more money rather than less money. So we just acknowledge the regressivity of every fee we ever collect, and then say, okay, so acknowledging that regressivity, how do we design a program that addresses that imbalance? And that's why, like, the low income, all those dollars now are directed to low income folks in low income weatherization. Turns out that when we look at
any reports on, I mean, we were doing weatherization when I was on the Community Action Board over 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Do we have a report or an assessment of how, and we keep doing it for low income people, do we have any assessment of how much money those folks have saved because we've done all this weatherization?
Sure.
And that would be helpful to have.
Actually, there's a great piece. We worked with Vermont Department of Health, and I'll get the handout. It includes the value of the health benefits to.
No, I'm not looking at health. There's also radon, which wasn't health detriment until we started tightening up houses. But
Right.
I'm talking about how much they saved in fuel, which is supposed to offset the regressivity.
So the figure we had 2 years ago, I'd have to tune it up, was, remember there was a proposal around to increase the fuel tax by 2 cents a gallon. It was going to raise, I think, another, I forget if it was 2 million or 4 million.
You aren't doing this on gasoline, right?
No. So
Okay.
fuel, this is
Home fuel.
home
Heating fuel.
Let me say
Heating fuel. Are you
fuel.
touching dyed kerosene?
As a matter of fact, they get taken out. Taken out.
I'm never
From-
sure if it's dyed or undyed, but
No,
I know it's
Whatever you
something
would
you're not
recommend,
supposed to
Madam Chair.
touch.
yeah, right. Dyed diesel gets taken out of the mix because it is even more complicated. It gets put in, it's intended, the other
It
name
has
for
to
it is
do with
off-road diesel.
agriculture.
So yes, so the savings back then was, if we had done that 2 cent increase, it was going to cost the average homeowner $15 a year more on their heating bill. But the anticipated savings in year one, if you were weatherized, was $600.
Okay, but if I'm not weatherized,
Right.
it's going to cost me $15 a year more. Okay.
Correct. That was the math back then, and I doubt it's changed a whole lot. It might have varied by the price of fuel.
I
But
could probably
the-
do that, but I'm pretty sure there are households who'd have a hard time doing that.
Right.
That's
Well, and
why
so
that's why we've
Right.
put a moratorium on shutting off their heat.
Sure. And so that's what I mean about acknowledging the regressivity of anything we do, and then saying, how do we design in such a way as to overcome it to the maximum degree possible. I will say this sounds a little flip almost, but at $15 a year, you could wait 39 years, and in the 40th year, they weatherize your home, and you'd recover the previous 40 years worth of payments. You know, like you're back to now. Who's going to live? No one's going to live there for.
Wait. Are they weatherizing my home for free? Because I'm sitting here like a lot of retirees on a fixed income. And if I have to take out a loan to weatherize my house any more than I've already weatherized it, given that it's a masonry home and I can't touch the walls, I'm not going to live long enough to pay off that loan to see any reduction in my heat.
Sure. So that's, we would be addressing that through another part of the program. That wouldn't be through the low income weatherization program where the homeowner pays none of the cost of the improvements, right? As you move up the income scale, then the proposal is that it's kind of like a sliding fee schedule. At the lowest end, like 80% AMI and under, it's totally a grant. That's our current program. As you go
percent AMI, tell me what that is in dollars.
Area median income.
Yeah, but what's the area median income in the state? Are we talking?
It varies pretty dramatically, like NEK to Chittenden, but for like Washington County, it's probably about $60,000.
So if I'm making over $60,000, I'm going to pay the extra fuel and I'll have to take out a loan to weatherize my house.
So from 80% AMI to 120, we're talking about doing things like buying down the loan rate, zero interest loans. And then when you go from 120 on up, then now someone has enough discretionary income. That's where we would still be looking to get a very attractive loan rate, but we're not subsidizing that individual's.
I'm not taking out any major debt at my age.
Well, we have another program for that. It's called on the bill metering. So I'll give you the 30-second version. There are something like 33 jurisdictions doing this now. The utility, for instance, your electric utility, they pay for literally all the home weatherization measures in your home. Zero cost to you, whether you're a renter or you're the homeowner. And you say, well, why would they ever do that? And that's because for two things. One, the loan that they've made a loan and it's to the meter at that spot. Whoever lives there for however long they live there, they pay something extra that repays the loan, but there's an assurance built in that their savings are going to cover at least 80% of what they're paying, over. So in other words, it's a very affordable way you don't have to come up with a loan. And when you leave that house, whoever pays that bill in subsequent years, they pick up that increment to pay it back. And the utilities are the ones, and you say, well, why would they ever do this with their money? Well, they can actually make money doing this, a little bit of money, but they have the ability to raise capital. And then the last version of that is we can also supply the utility with the capital that pays for the measures. So there's some very interesting models out there are working that don't require a loan.
Okay. I think it's worth looking at. I can assure you we're not going to fix it in 4 days, though. Right. So it could come out as a committee bill.
And just by way of reassurance, we're not trying to pass all that in 4 days. The only piece is setting up the structure for a thermal energy efficiency charge and then asking the PUC to do a proceeding.
I'd like to hear we sent the PUC out to look at this last year, so I'd like to
They,
what they have to say.
we
I've
didn't,
got Senator Pearson and then Senator McDonald. I can't, you do want to speak. Okay, we'll do Senator Pearson.
Is anybody required to take these services in the structure you're contemplating?
no. So if you don't
Well,
want
if
to
it's
sign
a
up,
tax, they are. They don't have to take the service, but they do have to pay the fee. If
Sure.
it goes down as a
You were
tax.
saying that we're forcing you to take a loan, and I just wanted to be clear.
No, no, I said I'm not, a lot, people in my age bracket where your home is your payment of your, nursing home bills, or, your a major asset. You just, it's not sound financial advice usually to take out major loans at
No,
that
the-
point.
it's
But
clear
if,
the
so
on-bill.
no, you're not forcing me to take a loan unless,
just, you could say, this program's not for me, I'm not going to sign up.
right, yeah. But if it's a
Or-
tax, you're forcing me to pay for that loan for other people. And I can't afford to take out a loan to have it done for me. And see the value.
Well, but this is the nut of my question, because the on-bill financing, for instance, would be hard in that scenario where you may not be living in your house
Right.
for very long.
And that's, but that's not what this bill is about, and that's why.
That is exactly what he said. That is.
No, he
what-
said that's an option, but that's not what I heard him say was coming in this bill. That's an
So,
option I'd like to talk about.
sure, all I'm saying I think why this bill would be in finance is because we're talking about renaming
Access.
a current tax, and that's really it. All the other things are part of what the ongoing work group is digging into, the different types of bonds, the no cost to owner on the bill meters, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but we're being asked to rename it for a specific purpose, which you then say we're still working on it. So it's not just renaming a tax. You're setting it up to be a fuel efficiency. Is it going to go on wood or solar?
No, it's on delivered. Well, so actually, it's interesting you ask about wood, but so
We also have a little bit of cognizant dissonance when it comes to burning wood.
Madam
Yeah.
Chair,
Yes,
this committee that is meeting and discussing today is the committee that raises revenues.
yes.
And what Senator Bray is saying, and the Natural Resources Committee, is that we are recommending we move ahead with a plan that recruits and trains qualified people to weatherize a heck of a lot more homes than the current funding sources will weatherize. And one of the things that someone in the legislature has to do is to find the money to pay for that after the one-time money runs out, and collect that money, or a system to collect it, or systems to collect it. And then another committee, the Appropriations Committee, has to authorize that money be spent. And before either the legislature is going to go ahead and commit to hiring a whole bunch of people, and then when they graduate saying, well, we haven't figured that other part out yet, or the fundraising committee is going to raise the funds in one or several ways to do that. And should we be committing ourselves to weatherizing houses and spending upfront money to hire to pay for the development of these skills and to issue graduation certificates, and then say, oh, well, too bad you trusted us. We haven't figured out how to pay for this yet.
Yeah,
That's the
well, we have a
dilemma.
problem with state troopers with that one too, but
We do, but we have a statutory goal by 2050 that either we're going to tackle because we believe we have an obligation to tackle it, or we're going to do what we sometimes do, which is not tackle it. So
okay.
that's what,
So
that's
we're
the question
talking now,
before us.
you've just added more though. You're now talking about the state recruiting and training people, and then the state paying people.
telling them there will be jobs available to do this work once they graduate.
The state of Vermont will be saying that?
They're,
It won't be state workers.
No,
the
but
governor,
are we?
the governor has
this-
committed upfront money to put
Yeah.
into the education systems we have available to recruit and train young people for the future jobs in weatherization. That is taking place. It's been offered. It's in the governor's budget. And
Well, yeah, but that hasn't been passed yet.
it hasn't been. So maybe we shouldn't bother passing it if we can't tell those people with good faith that they'll
How's the
actually be
governor
hired and they're
proposing to
trained.
do
And I
it?
think that's the discussion
Okay.
we're having now. You gotta
Yeah.
marry those two things. Or not promise them, we can promise that their teacher's retirement will be there if they choose to teach, but
Oh, well, that's
find out
a
if it's
place we
true
can
later
put
on.
money.
So that's the dilemma, Madam Chair. And
Yes.
so, and the two things can either be, we can't have it both ways. So, but we,
No, and that's
often
what I'm
try.
saying.
We
To
often
just
try.
say we're just renaming the tax when what we are really talking about is setting up a whole system. I'm not that dumb. I want to know what I'm committing to setting up. Thank you very much.
we're the ones that have to set up that system or agree
Okay.
to it or,
I just like all the cards on the table. All
Excellent.
right.
Yeah.
If a lobbyist did that, Senator, what would you call them?
If they did what?
Ask me just to fund this little one thing, knowing full well they were setting me up to look for a lot more next year.
I would say the same thing I'm saying now. You gotta be kidding if you're gonna, expect people to show up.
You'd
and
be
go to
drawing
work without their-
cartoons as
without their-
fast as you
yeah.
could.
Well, it would be a cliff, Madam Chair, in which
Yes.
the new graduates for the weatherization school are being thrown off like they were buffalo. Okay.
What school do you go to learn weatherization?
Well, a lot of places, VTC, the career technical centers, the trades themselves teach people their apprenticeship programs. If you're in the trades, you can get tuition support from Efficiency Vermont to go to VTC and get a building performance institute certification. There are a variety of ways, and then the community action agencies like Capstone train their own people as part of the
That's
work.
why we did it. It was job training.
To
Senator Pearson.
to Senator Bray's point, when we had ARA money, we pushed a bunch into weatherization, and now the agencies will tell you they have equipment sitting idle. They had to lay people off, and I think that is maybe where Senator Bray's coming from.
Right.
And Senator McDonald articulates nicely, like, we want to actually build this, not throw a bunch of money and hope it works in a few years, but actually build something that's ongoing and enduring. And now I'm better understanding your initial question is how much of it do we build now, even if it's sort of temporarily funded by this infusion of one-time money. It's
It'd be a good
a good
investment of one
question.
time.
The data is really clear that dollar for dollar, this is the place to invest climate money, and it has all sorts of other benefits, including jobs and saving people money on their fuel. But it's going to be an interesting conversation.
Right. I mean, what the struggle is, it's a little bit chicken and egg, like if you don't fund a program, if you don't create a plan for steady funding, then all the providers we talk to harken back to the ARA money Chris was just talking about. They say, don't do that to us again. Like we hired and then we had to fire because it was a surge of money. So we're trying to say, okay, we heard you, we get it. We're trying to create a structure that can fund for the long haul. Because right now, the governor's proposing one-time money. So it jumpstarts what we're doing, but I wouldn't want to move a bill that didn't figure out how to do the money for the long haul, because we would be jerking people around all over again, which was painful, expensive, and just not productive. So we're trying to figure out how to set up the structure. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes like, oh, we're talking about this and then we're going to switch to that. The best thing I could say is Efficiency Vermont and that program, we're trying to stand up something as substantial in terms of funding and size and durability in weatherization. And right now, Efficiency Vermont is multiples in terms of funding and size, and it gets multiples done every year compared to what we're doing on weatherization. So,
Okay, Senator Brock.
I would just raise one thing, as I've been listening to this discussion. You know, when we talk about most programs like this, we're talking about doing something that hits people at the lower end of the income scale, and that notion of 80% of the average wage. And so I understand that, and because those are the people who need help. But if you're going to make a major impact with respect to weatherization, it's going to be on the people who spend a lot of money on fuel and who are at somewhat higher income,
sure,
and who now are discouraged from investing. Many of the same reasons that Senator Cummings has referred to is based on their age and the inability to get any return on investment that is substantial enough to offset what they're spending on fuel today. It is absolutely discouraging when you think about what often the payback is. As a classic example, in my house, and I spend a lot of money on fuel, on oil, which heats the house. And I had a weatherization study done, and I could reduce the cost of that fuel by something like, I think it was 37%. But the problem is every individual thing that I had to do, no one of them would amount to more than 3%. And the sum total of doing all of those things would not have a payback in, I think it was 11 years. And to that, and again, given age, makes no sense for me to do any of it.
right.
The comment that you raised about the issue of adding something conceivably for a funding mechanism to the electric bill or some other something like that is intriguing, but it's got to make sense. It's got to make sense financially for people. Otherwise, they're not going to do it.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, in the end, that's the hardest bottom line is, if there's not demand for the work, who cares what you call the program,
Yep,
who's offering it? It's not going to fly. So we're really looking at from low income to moderate income to regardless of income, that we need programs, a blend of programs funded with a blend of revenue streams, because some will work well for one group and less well for another. So yes, we hear you. And an earlier version of the name of this was weatherization for all. It's not just low income. So.
Okay. This will be fun.
Well,
why don't you just call it affordable weatherization?
you could bring
Portable is overused.
bring a floor amendment.
I know, I meant that sarcastically because I think about affordable housing, which isn't affordable.
Right.
True.
Well,
Okay.
thanks for letting me float this thing out, because it's a little. I don't think I've ever worked on something where I did think about clean water. We created a structure for funding clean water before we finally named the ultimate funding source for it, and it helped us get going. We couldn't do both in the same session. It became clear in the end. So it does seem as though creating the structure ahead of time still leaves a lot of discretion on how you funded it and at what level. But at least you have a structure that when you find money, you can then deploy it, you're ready to go. It's not perfect, but I don't know a perfect answer.
There isn't. There isn't. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Oh, it's going to be a fun week. Sleep next week. You'll need it the week after.
Are we meeting town meeting week?
No. Unless you want to meet without getting paid.
Are you
And-
ready to stop the live stream, Madam Chair?